Steve Payerle, Club President, and I'd like to welcome you all to the 6th meeting of the 47th year of the Rotary Club of Dublin, Worthington. Today's invocation and pledge of allegiance will be offered by Frank Dunbar.
Our Father, to you we pray. Help us to listen that we might hear. Help us to look that we might see. Help us to learn that we might know. To know that with strength we can do for others that which they are unable to do for themselves. And for that strength, we ask you to bless these Rotarians in our hybrid COVID meeting. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Frank.
You're welcome.
Our program today will be introducing a little bit by Jennifer Best, but first we have a sergeant, Mr. Alan Grossman. Oh, we do. Yes, I'm sorry, I skipped right over that. We welcome guests first.
So we do have a visiting Rotarian, Jim Allen, is joining us. He is originally from Wadsworth and just returned back to Ohio from Virginia. Yay.
Now it's Alan.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. It's been a while since we've had sergeants. I just saying. Well, I mean, yes, you're right. But that said, I will start with our fines because I didn't wear a pin. If anybody else that doesn't have a pin, Joe, if you wouldn't mind grabbing that pot. And carrying it for me, please. And so while we're on the pin subject, if you didn't take like a split second to grab your name badge out of that box up front, maybe you'd be good enough to put the puck in as well. So we have some events coming, everybody, right? We have a rah-rah on the 25th of August, and an email went out. And I know that probably everybody here has already responded, whether they're coming or not. But if you haven't, please throw a buck in there. Of course, you only have to do 2 total. And it's at the Revelry. Try to say that 3 times fast, huh? Tavern in Dublin. Let's see. Historically, dress has been important in Rotary. And there seems to be one of us that knows how to do it. So everybody but Trent, for inappropriately dressing today, put in a buck. I mean, come on. All right, you're okay, Teresa, because you are appropriately addressed. You don't wear a suit. Okay, so let's take care of that. I think that's good, right?
You're throwing $5.
I know I'm out of control, but it's early in Morrow County, trust me. There was another survey that went out this week, maybe even last week, that's really important to our club's future. And so if you didn't respond to that for our good president, Steve, please throw in $1. And let's see, anybody playing the golf outing? Oh dear. It was on the 30th, yeah. I couldn't play because it got changed. So if you played in that, yeah, if you had enough money for golf, you got enough money to throw a buck in. Oh, come on, I'm just saying. And I couldn't help it. And I was training dogs, right? I noticed something really interesting when I came in today. Is it hot outside or cold outside?
Yes.
Yeah. And so what happens when you leave chocolate in your car this time of year? Well, somebody had chocolate in the backseat of their car. And if you're that person, I think it's appropriate that you're fined for leaving chocolate in your car this time of year. Okay. Anybody listen to the radio in their car, right? Anybody got a country music station on their radio?
Yeah, it's there.
No, that's like you were listening to it on the way in. Not just it's there, that you actually listen to it on a regular basis. Country radio. If you don't, you should put in $1 because it's really good music, right? All right, good. With that then,
Save it.
what do you call, I can't help it, I'm on a roll. What do you call bears with no ears? Bears with no ears. B. Thank you, everybody.
Nice job, Alan. Truly exquisite performance. All right, let's move to announcements. I've got a bunch, but Dave Kittredge, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted, Dave Hanson and I have been attending the Santiago Rotary meetings each week and discuss things back and forth.
Speak up, please.
We discuss things that are going on in our mutual clubs. And Dave mentioned Ann Bohachik's passing, and they were, of course, very concerned and sent their condolences at the meeting. But I think they also followed it up with a very nice letter, president to president. And we'll probably get that out in some fashion so that everybody see it. But
Yep.
I just want folks to know that.
Thank you, Dave. Any other announcements?
Yes. Can they hear me?
If you speak up.
When you use your regular voice.
Instead of whispering.
Use the outside voice. You can project.
Katie,
Hey.
the family picnic is on Sunday, September the 5th. And if you haven't signed up already, there's an email out there with a sign up, then you better do it quick. Because otherwise, we don't have enough volunteers. I'm gonna have to cancel this thing again. So let's move it. Of course, I'm joking about canceling it. But those who signed up will be doing double shifts. So to save your fellow club members, please sign up appropriately. Thank you.
If I might make a reminder, on September 20th, it will be the Bill Shantz Memorial Tournament at Scioto Reserve. We'd love to, if you have any interest in bowl sponsoring, meal sponsoring, any of that sort of thing, if you please reach out to me and I can give you information on that once I get it. But mark your calendars and come join us at Scioto Reserve Monday, the 20th of September.
What times?
I think it's a 9 o'clock shot. I don't know.
Any other
We're far away.
announcements?
Doesn't matter yet.
All right, so some of you, everybody should know that we had our strategic planning session last Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. And it was actually a pretty quick 5 hours, if you ask me. We had some fun, I think, and we got a lot of serious work taken care of. Lots came out of it. Right now, Jim Farmer and Teresa and I and the rest of the executive committee will talk about it here at our meeting at 9 o'clock, but we've got a lot of information to share, so keep an eye out for that. Talked about the Labor Day picnic, picture day. So we'll be meeting here next Wednesday and the Wednesday after for lunch meetings, and Alan Zink will be here taking photos right in that corner. You can tell that there's beautiful lighting, it's gonna be great. So make sure you're wearing, you know, your best Rotary regalia. Is that a word? Regalia? Yeah, so we can update pictures. And I think that's, oh, last but not least, we got Jim back. Jim, say hi to everybody. You're on mute. Good to see you again. Looks like you're doing well. All right, now we're ready for our program.
Okay. It's always kind of odd to introduce our own club member because everyone knows him, but I will just start by saying that this has been the most challenging year in public education, I think, ever, and probably a challenging year for everybody, but especially education, because we're dealing with people's children and there's nothing more important. But we are so fortunate in Worthington to have had Trent Bowers lead the way, and he's going to talk a little bit about the past year and the upcoming year and kind of his decision making and his thoughts about the whole year. So help me in welcoming Trent.
Yeah, I'm gonna just come up with that. I got a power or PDF. PowerPoint.
All right, guys, good morning. Good morning on the Zoom. So it's kind of awkward for Jennifer to say that because really what I wanted to start with was thanking Jennifer Best. So many of you have been associated with Worthington schools for a long, long time. And so you've seen ups and downs. You've seen growth of the school district in the 80s. You've seen struggles with finances and levies. You've seen levies pass. You've seen the repeal attempt of a school levy at one point. And you've seen the shrinkage of our school district from an enrollment standpoint. Now we're on this growth pattern again. And so you've seen all that. And Jennifer has served on our board for almost 20 years now as a Board of Education member. And I don't think we've seen anything like COVID, right? So the pandemic has been just unbelievable to attempt to navigate. And Jennifer has been really our rock as a school district. I mean, legitimately, I tell you, I would quit my job if it wasn't for Jennifer Best and just kind of her steadiness and common sense. And we just don't see much of that, right? There's incredible passion on both sides right now, and there are sides on every issue. And it's incredibly hard to navigate that as we look at things like public health guidance and recommendations and orders and what health department are you part of? And I talked a little bit about that in June. You know, I joked that I didn't know what health department Worthington Schools was part of. And I'd been the superintendent for 6 years. We're part of Columbus Public Health, by the way. But I know now, because in a pandemic, you have to know those things. So as we school beginning on August 18th, that's next Wednesday. We're super excited about school beginning. All of our kids will be in school. And we expect almost 11,000 students to come to Worthington Schools this year. So we will have potentially our highest enrollment ever in Worthington Schools this year. Mid-90s was in that 10.6, 10.7 range. And so we're expecting more than that. Now, I'll tell you, when I say expecting, we don't know for sure because the pandemic was just, last year was so challenging. More and more families homeschooled, sent their kids to private school. You know, it was hard to keep track. So our enrollment dipped by about 300 kids last year. We've had another 500 enroll throughout the summer. So we think we'll open with around 11,000 kids, but you never really know until kids walk in the door because sometimes they've moved, they don't tell you, the other school hasn't requested records yet, those kind of things. But enrollment is on the rise, and so we see that. I was on vacation this summer, the 4th of July week. We've been vacationing in Holden Beach, North Carolina. We were driving back from the beach on that Friday afternoon. I think it was July 9th. And we were in West Virginia, if you know those roads, like just north of Charleston before you get to the Ohio River. And my wife was driving. And so I thought I'll pull my phone up and I'll check my email, just see what's going on. Because I was trying not to do that much during the week. And I start looking at these emails and it's like, why haven't you required masks? And, you know, and what happened was we in June, when restrictions went away in the state of Ohio, we ran summer school for about 1,500 kids as what we called mask friendly. We wanted people to wear masks if they wanted to, but we didn't require our kids to wear masks. So we had a really good summer school. We had one COVID case that was not associated with school, but of a student who attended summer school. And that was it for the summer and these 1,500 kids. And we felt really good about things. We're making plans for our school year. But on July 9th, the CDC put out publicly these new recommendations for school. And literally within 2 hours, I had 30 emails that were things like, hey, you're a jerk. Why haven't you done your job already? These recommendations came out 2 hours ago, and I don't understand why you guys haven't been leaders, and like just this incredible barrage. And I'm like, like I didn't know new CDC recommendations went out, right? I shouldn't have checked my email. Like that was a mistake. And so that's just kind of, and since that day, it's just kind of spiraled, right? The CDC changed those recommendations and the American Pediatrics came out with their recommendations. And I will share that we respect both of those organizations and they're really important to what we do. But they also have recommendations for things like screen time for kids or the amount of sleep that kids get or what time we should start school. And we don't follow any of those recommendations, right? I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'm just saying that like we try to keep these things in perspective. And then the Ohio Department of Health came out with their recommendations and they're a little bit different than what the CDC put out. And then Columbus Public Health and Franklin County Public Health put out their recommendations. And in Worthington, we're super lucky. So like the Ross County Chillicothe Health Commissioner is a Wilson Hill parent. So he and I talk about how does he see the world differently than Columbus Public Health. But we've been tasked in Ohio with this decision of what kind of restrictions do you put in place? And it's an incredibly divisive conversation, right? So, as a board, we've received 500 emails on both sides that, you need to mask and here's why, and you're putting my kid at risk and, all sorts of things. And then, this should be a parent's decision and the government shouldn't be telling us what to do and leave it to parents. And both sides, I honestly believe, think they know or want what's best for kids. And both sides tell you to follow the science, and they send you emails or information or YouTube clips or research articles that tell you totally different things. And Ohio has pretty much said these are local decisions. Each local school district has to make their own decision on how they're going to deal with this. So in Worthington, we put out last Thursday that we are going to require masks for our students in kindergarten through 8th grade. And we're going to strongly recommend masks at 9th through 12th grade. And the difference there is all of our 9th through 12th graders have had an opportunity to be vaccinated. So that vaccine is available for everybody over 12. Our students who are under 12 are not eligible for that vaccine. And so our 6th graders, which are in the middle school this year for the first time, aren't eligible for a vaccine, most of them. So we're masking K-8. And some of that has to do with the quarantine guidance, which means how do we keep kids in school if they've been a close contact with somebody who has COVID? Because our goal is to run school every day. Now, in my head, we're like, hey, we're right back to where we were last year with all this negative public feedback. And honestly, we have a community that 50% think we should do one thing and 50% think we should do something else. And that's not unique to Worthington. If you follow this, that's every suburb or every place in America right now on these topics of masking and COVID restrictions and what's the right path. And I read the Wall Street Journal and they look at one path, and obviously the New York Times looks at a different path. And these are really smart people that are, so there's just not consensus on the right path forward. But that's the path we've chosen for Worthington. Some people believe we obviously should be mandating masks 9th through 12th grade. That's not, I think there's some real sense to that. The question that we're trying to work through and that all school districts are is, what do you do when people refuse right now? So, rules make sense and laws make sense when the majority of people choose to follow them, and then you can enforce them. But when a significant portion of people choose not to follow them, what's the recourse, right? How do you deal with it? How many kids? Are we going to really suspend 300 kids from a high school who decide to make a statement that they're going to refuse to wear a mask? And those are hard questions, right? Because our goal is to keep kids in school. We want them in school. What do you do when a parent sends a kindergartner and just says, they're not wearing a mask, you can't make them, and I won't come pick them up, right? Like, am I really going to call the police on a kindergartner? Or do I want that as what we see in the newspaper? Like, these are the things that all school districts are wrestling with. And at the same time, we want to keep kids in school. So last year during this time, we were in this just incredible national debate about, is it safe to go to school? Should we be in school? Should we be virtual? Should we, if you remember that whole world that we were in, and we started virtual and went hybrid, which meant half the kids during a time. And then we went back to virtual and went back to hybrid. My takeaway from last year was kids need to be in school. Kids need to be in school. And the thing is, that's everybody's takeaway. So we actually don't have the authority under Ohio law this year to make a decision to go virtual or hybrid. We were extended different authority away from that kind of seat time or number of hours that a school has to be in session. So this year, that's not an option for public schools in Ohio. Now, could the legislature make that an option if things got bad enough? They could, but right now, if someone says to me, why are you going to school? Or you should be thinking about virtual or hybrid, those aren't tools in our toolbox anymore that we did have a year ago. But I will tell you, we felt like we proved the last quarter of last year that kids can be in school safely, right? We had a really good quarter. And my takeaway was, just for watching my own kids, other people's children, and our teachers, they were just happy to be together. Like, we are made to be together. A computer screen between us, even though some of us are Zoom right now, is not the same, right? And it's especially not the same for our adolescents and teens. So it's hard as an adult to remember like what it's like, the teenage mind. I've got 3 teenagers at home, and it's hard even when they live in my house to think about how they see the world. But that need to connect, that social desire is so intense for our adolescents and teens. So social isolation presents unique risks to them from a mental health standpoint, and then by extension from a physical well-being standpoint, right? So we know they need to be together. So our goal is to do everything we can to run school. So we are mandating masks, kindergarten through 8th grade, to keep kids in school. If you've been vaccinated, then you don't have to quarantine if you're a close contact in Ohio law, okay, or under quarantine guidelines from Harvard Health. So what we're saying to our 9th through 12th graders is get vaccinated, right? We have a high percentage of families who have. We have zip code data for vaccination, so 43085, 43235. They can't break out kind of our slivers, our 43015s, our 43017s, 43229s, but our two main zip codes that are both all in Worthington schools, our adults are above 70%, so we're high, and our students are in that 60% range. And growing. So that's good news. And so we're trying to incentivize that vaccination for our high school kids to say, hey, the best way to make sure that you can stay in school every day and participate in all the activities that are so important to you is make sure you're vaccinated. So if, that vaccination is what we kind of call the get out of jail free card when it comes to quarantine. So we really want to push that. So we've run this week, we're doing scheduled pickups at all of our secondary schools, and at scheduled pickups, Columbus Public Health is running vaccine clinics for anybody who wants to get vaccinated. So you don't have to, right? Obviously, you have to have parent consent and all those kind of things. Now, again, we have people that, like, say, spoke at our board meeting Monday night and said, you should not be running vaccine clinics. This is outside of your scope. I mean, everything right now is polarized from a COVID standpoint. In school, because, everybody I'll say this. Typically, I think local control makes a lot of sense, right? We're always saying, hey, stay out of our business. Let us make our own decisions. With COVID, I've kind of flipped that. So I know I want things both ways. But with COVID, I'm like, it's ridiculous that the superintendent of schools or a board of education is making health decisions for the school district. Like, I'm not qualified to do that, right? I mean, we know that. I can't spell health decisions half the time. So it's, but it's where we are in Ohio. And this is what's been, given to us. And I've explained to families, hey guys, I know you're screaming at me through email, but is it really rational that I make these decisions? And they're like, no, but it's yours, so make it, right? And make it the way I want to. And so, that's just where we are. It's just kind of this incredible, crazy time, but we will be in school. Everybody will be in school. We're going to mask K-8. We're going to strongly recommend masks. You'll see our administrators always in masks. We've given teachers some ability to make their own decision based on their vaccination status. But most of the time they're going to be in masks because we know as adults, we need to lead by example. And so even at the high school, we didn't say mask optional, we said strongly recommend, right? And I will tell you, I have daughters at Thomas Worthington High School. There's not another time outside of maybe an Ohio State football game, which is inside, where that many people are in a tight space, right? If you walk in our hallways, I don't have to interact in that tight of a space. It really does make sense to put a mask on. Right? This is much tighter space than your grocery store or other things. And, teenagers are disgusting. And so a mask actually might make sense all the time, but they won't all choose to wear a mask. And we're not going to force them to do that, because part of it is we don't want to force them into a corner in the suspension and those type of things. So that's where school is. All of our activities are go. We do not have, last year we had restrictions on things like sporting events, like there were capacity limits in our stadiums. There are no capacity limits right now. So we will invite the community back into our activities. Outside of school, we'll strongly recommend masks for everybody, but we won't require, right? So if you show up to an event and you don't wear a mask, nobody's going to tell you to put a mask on, those kind of things. Nobody's going to tackle you, for not having a mask on. And we do have people that think we should be tackling people for not having a mask on. So our focus this year, though, is really reconnecting our kids. They have been disconnected. We give a survey every year we call the Panorama Social Emotional Learning Survey. And our data last year took a significant drop in what's called sense of belonging. And sense of belonging measures how kids feel connected to their school and to their peers. Well, it doesn't shock us that they would take a significant drop, right? We had these restrictions in place. They weren't in school. They weren't allowed to be together. But we need to rebuild that sense of belonging, because again, for kids, that matters for all of us. That's part of why we're part of Rotary, right? Is sense of belonging, but it really matters in those teen years. We need our kids connected to one another. We need them connected to healthy school activities. So that's our goal. And so, some real focus on early literacy. That, our data would show that our kids actually did learn last year. We didn't see the kind of data drops that you would think, but there is risk for those kids who are in that kindergarten, first and second grade, where that early literacy is so important. And you had this really disjointed kind of, I would say, messed up year. In Worthington schools, Phase 1 of our master facility plan is complete. So this is our middle school renovation, the opening of the new Payerle Middle School. It is awesome. So we are super excited. We built about 150,000 new square footage at the middle school. We renovated about another 100,000 square feet at our middle schools. So you see new student commons at Kilbourne Middle. If you've driven by that building, if you haven't, take a look. The outside is spectacular. A new office, secure entrance at Kilbourne Middle. That was the least we did. McCord has a whole new academic wing and a new student commons area. And then Kilbourne and Worthington Way are really total renovations. Just Worthington Way and Perry are really total renovations. Just spectacular. So we're excited about that. This is the year where we've been talking about for a really long time. Our 6th grade moves from the elementary school to the middle school. So we will be kindergarten through 5th grade at our 11 elementary schools, 6th through 8th grade at our middle schools, 9th through 12th grade at our high schools. But these are really exciting additions. We are going to invite everybody in the community out to those additions in September. So if you drive by now, we have occupancy, things look pretty good, but they don't look totally good, right? What I would tell is COVID really challenged us during construction. We actually had some more time where kids weren't in the building, which was great. But you kept running into employee issues with COVID. They'd have to shut a crew down. And I tell people, I joke, but everything in America is on back order, right? So there's just, you just think like, why isn't this here? It's like, well, we ordered it 6 months ago and it normally takes 5 weeks to get here. And the backboards aren't here or the paint is on, like just crazy stuff. And we've got some metal panels on the roof at Worthington Way that it's just like 3 or 4 pieces are missing, but it's like, I can't like stop looking at those 3 or 4 pieces. Like it just drives me crazy. And so I'm like, where is it? And well, it was back ordered and then they shipped it from Philadelphia. And when it came, it was the wrong pieces. They sent the wrong pieces. So now you start the process over. Order, back order, so like all that will clean up, but we hope that by September 19th and 26th that, all the construction trailers are gone and the landscaping is at least graded dirt and all that kind of stuff. And we can really invite our community out, but we are excited for people to see these new spaces. Additionally, you're seeing a new playground going at Wilson Hill Elementary. All of our elementary schools are getting what you would think like picnic pavilions, right? So, cement block ground, that picnic pavilion. We really want to provide more outdoor space for our kids to be able to do some outdoor learning. That's some of that pandemic thinking is how do we, provide more outside time, right? And that's really important to our kids. And so you see that investment going on. And we're excited about that. We also, a couple of years ago, embarked on this in this master facility plan, balancing our high school enrollment. So Thomas Worthington was 1,800 kids, Worthington Kilbourne was 1,300 kids. Both were going to grow, and we need them to be more in balance from an enrollment standpoint. So as neighborhoods change, enrollments change, and so we 3 or 4 years ago now told the kids that were at Slate Hill Elementary they were going to, instead of go to Thomas, go to Kilbourne. And then they've transitioned through middle school, and now they'll begin as freshmen. That first class they'll begin as freshmen. So we didn't move any students from their current high school because once you become a cardinal or a wolf, kids get that tattoo and they don't want to get rid of it, right? And so it's so we didn't move any of those kids, but so this will be the first class of Slate Hill students that feeds to Worthington Kilbourne High School. And then over the next 4 years, we'll get to a place of enrollment balance. And one of the cool things is we'll also get to a place of demographic balance, right? So we'll have social emotional balance, we'll have pretty good racial balance at both high schools. But our first goal was just enrollment balance. So that Slate Hill transition is happening and they are beginning as wolves. So that's pretty cool. We always want to talk a little bit about where we are financially, and the truth is we're at a good spot. So at the end of the first year of the pandemic, so if you think back March of 2020, nobody knew what was going to happen. In June, we received a really significant cut to public education. And so the governor made that cut, and they estimated we would lose about $28 million over a 5-year period of time. So that's a significant reduction. To offset that, we made $1.8 million of reductions yearly, right? So looking to offset about 10 million of that 28 million over that 5-year period of time. No reduction in public education is easy, but we thought that was an important thing to do. And really, the state budget, as you know, at least as of now, has stabilized pretty well. Like the projections things have come in better than were projected. And so that's good for public education. Now, obviously, with this Delta variant and all the, there's just all this variability right now. But you see that moving forward. If you followed school funding, every 2 years, there's a new school funding plan that they put out, and this is going to fix everything. And usually it fixes some things and not other things. So you may have heard about the Fair School Funding Plan, and there's a lot of advocacy around that. That did pass. That seems positive for public education in Ohio. It really has no discernible positive effect for Worthington. It doesn't necessarily have a negative impact on Worthington, but it doesn't fix anything for Worthington. So we still receive about $6 million less per year than what we believe we're entitled to based on our student enrollment. So what we call that the cap, and the cap means that if they funded us for all of our kids, we'd get X, but they've said, hey, we can't afford to fund you suburban school districts because you guys have enough capacity to raise taxes on your own. We're going to send that money somewhere else. So you guys are going to get Y. And so that gap between X and Y for us is about $6 million a year. And I really don't see that changing in our current structure in Ohio because, most of our state legislature, as you know, comes from rural areas in the state of Ohio that are struggling. And they look at the suburbs of Columbus and say, hey, this is the land of milk and honey. You guys take care of yourselves. There's other more important areas to take care of. And so, that's just kind of is what it is. When you live in a place like Worthington or Westerville or Dublin, you're like, whoa, right? Like, I'm not sure but I don't foresee any shift in that in our current political setup. So we are likely to return to voters in the next few years. We passed an operating levy and a bond issue in 2018, and we said it would last for 4 years. I'm not ready to say publicly, but I'll say to Rotary, I think it should last at least for 5 years and maybe 6 years. So our financial management has been strong. We'll have to come back and try to figure out what's the next part of our facility plan and how do we fund that. But even our next part of our facility plan should be able to be done as kind of a no new millage operating levy, which means it won't reduce somebody's taxes, but it also won't add to somebody's taxes because we know that we have significant ongoing facility challenges. We've dealt with some of our middle schools, but most of our schools, as you know, were built in the 50s. Well, half of our schools were built in the 50s and 60s. The other half were built in the 80s. And while I don't look at the 80s as that long ago, that means now they're 35 to 40 years old. And so therefore, that's kind of where we are. So as we look at this school year, we are really just prepared to support our kids. Again, what we've talked to staff about is we will get to our academics. Our first job is to connect with our kids, right? We say that every child should have a trusted adult who they know cares about them and believes in them. And that's our whole messaging is around let's reconnect with our kids and make sure they know they're cared about and that somebody believes in them. When we do that, we think we can build on that for academics. But if we don't do that, you don't bludgeon somebody into academics. That just doesn't happen. So that's really our goal. And that's all of our messaging to our staff is really about being together, being reconnected. I do need to say our staff has been great. You read about union issues and different things. We've had very few union issues. We've had very few times where that has come into play in Worthington schools. They've been really good partners. But there are no two people in America, including in our own house sometimes, where they think the path is clear on the right path forward with COVID. So our staff is all over the place, right? We have some staff saying that we should wear masks. We have other staff saying I can't work if we wear a mask. We have, you've just got our staff is all humans. And so they all, have their own thought process and no two of them are the same. So one of the great challenges with COVID that we've been talking about is, hey, it has changed how we view colleagues. It's damaged relationships because people are very public about here's how I think this should happen. And somebody else thinks, no, this is how I think it should happen. And then they all put it on social media, right? Which is, a whole nother conversation, or people segregate themselves into these Facebook groups and everybody in that Facebook group thinks exactly like they do. And then they all tell everybody to email me at the same time. And so, we really have to kind of rebuild community even within staff because there aren't 3 staff members who think alike. I can't tell you this is so when we were looking at masks, I reached out to both of our union presidents and said, give me your feedback. Here's what I'm thinking. what do you think about masks? And both were like, I can't touch it because my staff is totally split. They can't come to consensus on here's what we think because, and that's just kind of the COVID world we live in. We are looking, if you see this little bullet down here, I know it's hard to read, but we are into phase 2 of our master facility planning. So we created this 3-phase master facility plan, and that was middle schools in phase 1. And then the plan for phase 2 was Thomas, Worthington High School, and a couple elementary schools. But we always said we'd bring our community back together and we'd look at it. Does that plan still make sense? Because the plan was built 5 years ago now. So we have a task force that met all of last spring. They'll meet this fall. They meet tonight in person. We haven't been meeting in person. We meet tonight in person. But we want to come up with, does this plan still make sense for the future? Because we know we have to keep making progress on our facilities. We really do. Like it's like any old house. If you don't make some progress, eventually you're going to have to do something with it. So we need to make progress. But again, we're set up financially where we can do a lot of work without having to ask for, we'll have to ask for voter approval, but we won't have to ask to raise taxes on that part of it. We will have to come back for operating money, part of the deal. So including renovation and replacement of Thomas. Thomas is really our highest priority as far as like a building that we know needs to be really transformed from a learning environment standpoint. Obviously, there's a political challenge with that because we're a 2 high school district, and Worthington Kilbourne High School is in really good shape, and Thomas Worthington needs a lot. And navigating that politically is going to be the great challenge. It's if you've seen pictures of Upper Arlington's new high school, it is unbelievable. It's going to be awesome. But my jealousy there is they're a 1 high school district. So it's one thing to say, hey, everybody's going to benefit from this, vote for this because every kid in the district is going to go through this. So, the challenge that we have as a 2 high school district, which I believe, by the way, is the right choice for Worthington because it gives a lot more opportunities for kids. But from a facility standpoint, how do you convince half your population to vote for something that they're never going to see, right? So that's just, so we're looking at that. So we're looking at, how we deal with that. So anyway, I just wrap up to say outside of this COVID thing, which is real and a challenge and something we're dealing with, it really is an exciting time. We're going to see our highest enrollment probably ever this year. We're opening Perry Middle School again. Facilities are amazing. I do hope on the 19th and 26th that you can come out and walk around. If you don't want to come then, you can call me and I'll take you over anytime you want to. But you need to see them, especially some of you, if you were ever in Worthing Way or had kids go through or Perry, it's super cool because you're like, oh man, where I'm standing used to be this, right? Like they're really cool facilities if you don't have that history with them. But if you do have the history, it's like, man, I can't believe this used to be the office or this used to be, so that's super fun. Great group of staff, great group of administrators. And Steve, I will take any questions that anybody has.
Okay, Trent, I'll
Yeah.
start. You talked about the decision making and decisions you've never had to make before. And I know you did not do them all by yourself. Can you talk a little bit about the people you worked with that kind of helped you in the decision making and who you relied on?
No, that's great. So, most of these are health decisions. So we're meeting every week with public health. So we're meeting with Columbus Public Health and Franklin County Public Health. Again, Worthington is part of Columbus Public Health. And that's just kind of a long-term quirk. The city of Worthington and Columbus have always been together as part of Columbus Public Health. Everybody around us is in Franklin County Public Health. That's never mattered before. It's usually like an inspection or you deal with whooping cough or something, and that's great. In COVID, this has been just this incredible frustration because we also in Worthington sit on the Delaware County line. So we have schools that are a mile from an Olentangy school. And what's gone on is the Ohio Department of Health puts out information and then each health department reads it, kind of like lawyers read something, and then they make their own decision on how they're going to implement what came from the Ohio Department of Health. And it's just vastly different. So the Delaware County Health Commissioner looks at things very differently than the Columbus Public Health Director. And Columbus Public Health Director is great, but she looks at things very much from an urban standpoint. And how do we deal with a very low vaccinated population and how are we going to protect in that area? And that makes total sense, but it doesn't really make total sense for Worthington because we, in this case, don't fit that. So we talk with Franklin County Public Health, but the rules for us come from Columbus Public Health. And frankly, they're a lot more militant on their rules than Delaware County is. And so we have parents that are like, but if Olentangy can do this, why can't you do this? And I get it, but this is so we're talking with them every single week. They've been really good partners, but you're just trying to filter, what they want. And public health's job is to be as cautious as possible from the health standpoint, right? So from a physical standpoint, if we're protecting kids physically against COVID, I do believe this makes sense. What we have to try to balance as educators and then even as parents is there's physical safety, but then there's other pieces of safety when it comes to, a student from social isolation and from mental health and from activities. And then one of the things we learned really quick is public health really doesn't understand things like school sports or club sports or other activities. Like they don't understand how kids interact today. And so how do you, make decisions that make sense at the school level? So we're talking to them. We have a contact at Nationwide Children's Hospital who we spend a lot of time talking with. And I told you the Ross County Health Commissioner lives in Worthington. So he's also translating this information for his school districts in the Chillicothe area. So we talk with him quite a bit because frankly, his interpretation is often very different than what we get in the Columbus standpoint. So we're hearing from all those pieces. Obviously, I talk to a board of education. So, I will tell people often in my job, I work for the Board of Education. And so when the majority of the Board of Education believes something, that's like having a boss. Now, rarely does everybody on the board agree on something. And so that's part of navigating a board. But listen, if you want different decisions, you have to elect different people. Because sometimes, people think superintendents make decisions. I make decisions that I know my Board of Education is going to support. It's never in my personal best interest if I want to get to keep my house and my kids go to Worthington schools and those kind of things for me to make decisions that I know my board is against, right? So, even if it's not a board decision, you're always weighing, okay, I know how this person thinks. I know how this person thinks. I know how this person thinks. What do we do? So this last round of mask decisions, the board said, hey, this is a superintendent decision. This is not a board decision. And that was great. No problem with that. But I did talk with each board member about here's the plan I plan to put forward. And one board member said, I totally do not support that. I want this. Another board member said, I don't support that, but I love you. Right. And they wanted the opposite of the board member that right. And then there were three that were kind of like, I think I can support that. I don't know. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I'm not totally sure. Right. And so then you put something out. Right. And then you hope that they stand with you or they don't stand with you. And that's just, where we are. And so we are getting a lot of feedback. I will tell you the other thing about COVID is everybody knows a doctor and every doctor gives a different opinion. And again, I don't know, I never expected that, right? You just, you have a disease or, an illness. And so you think like the doctors are all going to tell you the same thing. Maybe the public's going to tell you something different, but the doctors, and they're just, they're just nobody's aligned. And so it just is what it is. Pete?
What probability do you give to do a replacement for Thomas Worthington versus a renovation?
So I think
higher probability.
Yeah, I think it needs to be, I think potentially you keep your gyms that were built, but everything else probably gets replaced. Maybe you keep your auditorium. So all the academic wings have to be replaced. We have a basement at Thomas that no matter how much money we've put into it, how many sump pumps we put into it, how many, it just isn't a place kids should be. I do think it'll fit the community. We can easily put something on that site that doesn't mess with the grass off 161, that doesn't mess with the trees. Obviously you can actually make it look I think we romanticize Thomas Worthington. You drive by and you kind of see the four columns and you move, but it's really not an attractive building right now. It's just a mess of brick so actually we can make it look better for the community. The plans that, the kind of the original plans that I've seen, I think are no brainers, would be awesome. I think the community will support it. The question is, how do you package that financially where you can get enough votes where half the other part of the community comes with you? You need to do some things to Kilbourne High School. Kilbourne High School is 31 years old, but it really was a super well-built building. The people that built that building, they just did a great job. Just well-designed, cost a lot of money when they built it, but it really has served us well.
I was thinking what would be nice to help with your quest to kind of sway people is to show the condition of Thomas Worthington. I got lucky, my son visited there all summer, he took math class all summer to advance, but anyways, he came back and told me, he's like, Mom, it's nothing like Worthington Kilbourne. I am so lucky to be at Worthington Kilbourne.
Yeah, I mean, so I always want to preface that, like Thomas, I went to Thomas in the late 80s, and Thomas has had some renovations since, like the gyms are different, the cafeteria is different and stuff, but ultimately it's not different than it was. Like, it's not worse, it's actually better than it was at that time. Our standards have changed. What we expect for schools for kids have changed than what we used to have. My own daughters have a great experience at Thomas Worthington. Like, I'm not, but from a facility standpoint, it's a money pit. Like, it's that old house that no matter how much money we put in, it, you know, you keep having to put more money in and you really don't fix it. You just delay the problem. And so from a community standpoint, yeah, that, and I do think you drive by it and you're like, yeah, it's great. You get a nice sunny day and the property looks awesome and all that kind of stuff. But it's just an old school that doesn't serve kids well today. So, I mean, I think our community will come with us on that, but.
So you seem to have your finger on the pulse, and I don't, of the condition of this Delta growth in young kids. And what do you know about that locally? You hear a lot of news in Texas and Louisiana, and are you seeing and hearing those statistics of that growth in
No,
the
so
28 to 13-year-old kids being more dramatically?
yeah, we really are not. So obviously COVID cases are up. So, you know, last we heard cases in Franklin County were above like 170 per 100,000. They were down to like, you know, under 50 over the summer. So cases are clearly up. They are very concerned from a public health standpoint about the Delta variant. But we don't have any statistical data that says, say, you know, like one of the arguments that we hear a lot is, listen, statistically, kids under 12 aren't at real risk of COVID. And that's actually pretty true. Like when you talk to public health, you know, they'll say that's true, but we should still be careful. They haven't been right. But statistically, you know, more kids died of pneumonia last year in Ohio than they did of COVID. But there is concern of the Delta variant. But there's no real statistic right now that says this is, you know, but they do expect, just based on the math and what we're seeing from a positivity rate. So positivity rates at 7.5%. They expect that COVID number, I think yesterday there was like 2,300 cases in Ohio, to go up. Because the math tells you if the positivity rate is here, and this is the case as you're seeing, it is going to rise before it gets better. That is concerning, right? We want to keep kids in school. We want our kids to be healthy. We, you know, knock on wood, like you're always praying that the decisions you make help kids stay healthy. We have, you know, haven't had any kids who've had, at this point, serious COVID issues, and we've had plenty of kids have COVID, but it, you know, you're trying to balance this conversation about, you know, this is what public health tells you to do, and are we really, like, can we really go against that? And yet we have a lot of people in America right now, in Worthington, who have just said, I don't care what the CDC says, they're wrong. I don't care what, you know, like they've just come to that conclusion. And I've come to the conclusion that I can see both sides of that. I mean, there is enough evidence on both sides. And if I was doing things differently last year, we would have been in school every day. Like my takeaway, I thought I was doing the right thing. Multiple times the Board of Education was blamed for going to remote learning by people in the community. And those were my calls where I was like, listen, here's what public health told me. Here's what I've heard. We need to go to remote learning. Like I just, that was on me. I thought that was the right thing. I really thought. But my takeaway was that schools in Cincinnati and schools in Cleveland that stayed in school every day, in the end, did the right thing. And I think that was the takeaway for most of America. So I don't know what our takeaway, Teresa, is going to be this time next year, right? Like, will I say, you know what, we should have masked all of our kids K-12, or will I say, you know, it might have been overkill for us to mask our kids K-8? I don't know the answer to that. We are, I should have said, but we're a little different. We had a K-12 mask mandate in Ohio last year. All kids had to wear a mask at all times. We are masking inside during the school day. So our kids will take their mask off at recess if they go outside for gym class. So there's some distinction there that was different than last spring. Some people believe that distinction absolutely necessary. Other people believe that that distinction is not the right path forward. So again, we're all, you know, the other thing I'd say is people just have no understanding that nobody really has answers, right? So the Ohio Department of Health put something out, health departments are waiting for it, they've got to translate it, then the Ohio Department of Health changes it again, health department, like, and so you want, like, you know, you want to be able to say, this is how things are going to work. And yet you get on these calls with the state, like they're all making it up as they go too. So kind of where we are. Yes, sir.
Did you consider requiring vaccination, or is that?
No, so we haven't talked about that at this point. And I got those emails this weekend a little bit. So there's a law in Ohio that goes into effect October 13th that you can't treat vaccinated and unvaccinated people differently while the vaccines are under emergency status. But if you've been listening to that, they think the Pfizer vaccine will be off emergency status for the next couple of weeks. Now, I haven't really heard an update on Moderna and J&J because that'll matter, right? Like, and so then the question is, I've been, you know, trying to figure out when that conversation comes up, are we prepared for it? So Ohio is a collective bargaining state. I don't have a legal opinion yet that says if we wanted to, and I'm not saying we want to, but if we wanted to, is that something we'd have to collectively bargain with our union, or is that something we could implement on our own? I don't know the answer to some of those things yet. I don't believe there's a school district, a public school district in Ohio, or in Ohio for sure, but in the US that's actually required vaccines. But I do think, as I'm reading the tea leaves, that potentially if the Delta variant continues and these vaccines leave emergency status, you're going to see more of a flood of vaccine requirements happen. And then that conversation certainly comes to us as a public school district, and we have to have that conversation. So when I met with our union presidents this week, I actually asked them that. Like I said, listen, I think this is coming as a conversation. You guys need to make sure that your legal gives an answer. Like we have our legal team, they have theirs, that kind of thing, right? So we want, like, we all need to know what the rules are going to be here. Does the Board of Education have the ability to make that decision if we chose to? Or is that something you'd have to sit down and collectively bargain? Because only our administrators, our principals, and people like me are not part of the union. So all of our support staff are unionized in one union, and all of our teachers are unionized. And so most things have to go through the collective bargaining process in Ohio. I don't know if this would. That's this gray area that we've never been through before. So
I think I echo those in this room and on the Zoom, Trent, that we're so lucky to have you in the position. And I would encourage you to stay here, because I'm sure a bunch of much larger school districts would love to have you on the payroll. And with this mask issue, I know you are really happy that you're not in an elected position.
yeah, so I'll address both of those. First of all, thank you. Second of all, my goal is to be at Worthington, right? I have no other desires. When I took this job 7 years ago now, I recognize they'll probably run me out of here before I get to retirement age, because I need to go another 12, 13 years. Like the odds are, I mean, that's just the odds in the superintendent job. My best hope, the board just gave me a new contract, and it allowed me to say to my freshmen in high school, hey, you're going to get to graduate from Worthington. And that was huge, because that's, I have a freshman, I've got a nephew who's a sophomore, a daughter who's a junior, and I, want nothing more to be in Worthington and watch them go through. And that's just such a cool thing. But Worthington's where I want to be. But yeah, I mean, being elected right now would be a nightmare. And our board is.
It's a nightmare.
Yeah. It's,
Well, I'll say too, nobody is responsible for somebody else's actions.
Yeah, that's true. So listen, it's people have just, I mean, so if you read about the 1918 pandemic, we're just seeing the same human behavior we saw 100 years ago. And for, we don't like restrictions as Americans. And we're just in this spot. And then I just layer on top of that technology. And technology has changed how we think and how we interact and people's access to us and their impulse control. And adults are no better than kids. Like, we spend all the time in the world talking about our teenagers and their social media use. And the truth is, our adults in many cases are just as bad or worse. And so that's just kind of changed the game with what we're doing. I'll say though, I don't know if Paul or John Butterfield are still on this call, but there are some positives. Some people my email is just unbelievable, the things people will say. But sometimes that because they said it, they don't come and yell at us face to face at board meeting, right? So it's not all bad. And those of you that have been in Worthington before, we've gone through redistricting 25 years ago and people were really angry, or we've gone through budget cuts, some of this human behavior isn't abnormal. It's just, this is the time that we're in. And I just, probably never understood before a pandemic how people in Worthington, I understand politics and how we're split in America and all those things, but how just neighbors, or even my wife and I at times, just can think very differently about what the right path forward is for, do you let them do this? Do you not let them do this? Should they have to wear a mask? Shouldn't they wear a mask? All those kind of things. And I'm going to talk to my staff, or our staff, like all 1,300 employees, on next week. And one of the things I'm going to share is last fall, we let my girls go to Florida. I have 3 daughters. We let them go see their grandparents in November. And my parents really wanted them to come. And I wasn't sure it was the right thing. If you remember back to last November, should you travel? Should you not travel? And my parents are in a condo and, plenty of space. And, so we let the girls go, and we let them go because I felt like it was really important for my mom's mental health. My mom was really missing being together. And we just decided, for my mom, this is the right thing. It's that outweighs the risk. And people that I've known my whole life called for my resignation on social media because they said I wasn't taking COVID seriously enough. And you go, that's just where we are, right? So you're trying to make the best decision. And I think everybody's just trying to make the best decision for their family, for their kids, trying to listen to public health, but also balance the other things that are going on in life, right? Because life doesn't stop here. We got to figure out, how do you navigate things? And I don't know that there's any black and white answers. But people want there to be. And so that just creates this incredible where we are. And I will tell you, Worthington, I meet regularly with other superintendents. I had breakfast with the Olentangy superintendent yesterday, and talked about someone getting arrested at Dublin's board meeting the night before. And I'm actually for all the things I talk about in Worthington and our strife, we're really lucky. It hasn't been half as bad here as what but I'm wired, right? We're always wired to think the grass is greener somewhere else. And so I wallow in my self-pity of the challenges that we have in Worthington. And I look at well, everything's great in Olentangy. They don't have any issues, but they just changed mascots at high schools. And also Dublin superintendent is no longer Dublin superintendent. He was Hilliard superintendent. So, life is good in Worthington. We're really lucky. It's just, I screwed up, and Steve, I'll be quiet here when I'm done, but I screwed up and I got my head in the wrong place because I went on vacation in July and we're at the beach and I'm reading fiction books and thinking, you know what, we're good to go. I just thought that the worst of the pandemic was behind us. We'd run a great summer school in June and we were just rolling, and our messaging for the year. And I write my convocation work in June, and I had all these things about we're free from restrictions, and now I'm editing all that out. I just didn't, I don't know. That was naive, and that was probably just short-sighted thinking, because if you read about pandemics, we always knew that there was a good chance that this is where we'd be. And yet in my mind, I wasn't there mentally. And I think a lot of people are in that place, right? And you're man, but we're not where we were a year ago. We are in Worthington schools. We are going to school. Every kid's going to participate in their activities. It is honestly, and our email box, Jennifer and I, and it's just nasty. But the truth is 90% of people will throw a mask on, smile, take pictures of their kids on the first day. The kids will be in new shoes and a new backpack, and they'll forget their lunchbox and like all the normal things that will happen. And then it's like, it's really, we're challenged on either side, but most people just want to go to school, just want their kids to be part of things. And that's going to happen. And so we're super excited about that. And then again, like watching kids walk into these new spaces at the middle school, and we got them all t-shirts this year with it says, Perry 21 or McCord, and it's, the McCord and Perry are blue because they feed to Kilbourne, and Worthington and Kilbourne are red because we want these kids, like you're part of this new middle school structure. And so I'm seeing these kids like sitting on the wall outside of Graders in their red and blue t-shirts, and you're like, I'm like, don't wreck your cars. I'm trying to take a picture as I drive by, because that's the good stuff, right? Like that's the stuff we want. And so, all those challenges, we're going to have more challenges. I don't know what they're going to be, right? Can we run school successfully? We think so. Are the restrictions that we started with what we're going to finish with? I don't know, right? I desperately want, if you want to pray for something, if you pray, that 5-11 vaccine, right? So approval of the vaccine for all of our kids elementary school up would be really helpful, because I will tell you that our parents at the 9-12 level, while there's no concern, they feel much more comfortable because they've been able to have that vaccine. It's our families where the vaccine is not yet available, who are really, really concerned, and maybe rightfully so. So that, like, the one thing that I'm eagerly awaiting is when will that approval happen? And then, obviously that doesn't lift all of our restrictions, but it may change how we view parents' rights versus school rights and those kind of things. So anyway, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Fantastic presentation, very informative. I'm standing here kind of regretting moving to Dublin now because there's so many good things going on at Worthington. Doggone it.
Come on back.
Shh, don't tell my friends or my wife. All right, we are running out of time, so let's do a quick raffle.
Right, a whopping $9. That could pay for lunch, maybe. Okay. The winning ticket is 665904.
Here we go.
Dave Hanson.
Okay. But however, the bonus for coming to a breakfast meeting is that Ace of Spades is $111. So that is worth coming to this breakfast, giving up early, right?
Sure, let's put his ticket back in.
Oh, his, okay.
Yes, he does.
Watch it win again.
And it's happened.
Okay, it's 665923. Maybe I'll win. Oh, I did. That wasn't fixed. Right.
We believe you.
But I doubt if there's 50 cards here. Wouldn't that be lucky? Queen of diamonds.
Queen of diamonds.
So we'll tear that one up and we'll go for it again next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Shirley. Next week's meeting speaker will be Gavin Myers, founder of North High Brewing Company, and he's going to be talking about the history and future of Central Ohio's premier craft brewery.
Any
And
samples?
I do not know if they will be bringing free samples. However, you should come and find out.
Yeah.
And with that, we will adjourn with the four-way test. Let me pull that up. So the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. First,
Is it the truth?
Truth.
Second, is
Is it fair to all concerned?
Third,
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
And fourth, will it be
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.
Good morning. I haven't responded.